The morning sun filtered through the grand windows of Rosewood Palace, casting long shadows across the marble floors where Princess Isabella once walked with such grace and joy. Now, those same corridors echoed with a silence that seemed to penetrate the very walls of the ancient royal residence. The palace staff moved quietly, their usual chatter replaced by hushed whispers and concerned glances. Prince Alexander stood at the window of his private study, his broad shoulders tense beneath his perfectly tailored morning coat. His usually bright blue eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, and his normally pristine appearance showed subtle signs of the emotional turmoil that had consumed his life for the past week. The pristine gardens below, once a source of peace and tranquility, now seemed to mock him with their vibrant colors and abundant life. The tragedy had struck without warning, shattering the fairy tale that the kingdom of Valdoria had watched unfold over the past 2 years. Alexander and Isabella's love story had captured hearts across the nation and beyond. Their wedding had been a spectacular affair, watched by millions who believed in the power of true love and the promise of a bright future for the royal family. Isabella had been radiant during those early months of marriage, her infectious laughter filling the palace halls and bringing warmth to even the most formal state occasions. The announcement of her pregnancy had sent waves of celebration throughout the kingdom. Street parties erupted in every village and city, with citizens hanging royal banners from their windows and baking special treats in honor of the future heir. The palace had been transformed into a haven of preparation and anticipation. The royal nursery, located in the East Wing, had been meticulously designed with the finest craftsmen from across Europe contributing their skills. Hand-painted murals depicting scenes from beloved fairy tales adorned the walls, while a magnificent crib carved from ancient oak stood as the centerpiece, passed down through generations of royal children. Isabella had spent countless hours in that room, her hands gently resting on her growing belly as she spoke softly to the child within. Alexander would often find her there in the evenings, humming lullabies that her own mother had sung to her during childhood. Those moments had been precious beyond measure, filled with dreams of teaching their child to ride horses, showing them the secret passages of the palace, and passing on the traditions that had shaped their family for centuries. The royal physician, Dr. Edmund Hartwell, had been cautiously optimistic throughout the pregnancy. Isabella had maintained excellent health, following every recommendation with the dedication that characterized her approach to royal duties. She continued her charitable work well into her second trimester, visiting children's hospitals and attending fundraising events for various causes close to her heart. The kingdom's media had followed every development with respectful interest. Unlike some royal families who struggled with invasive coverage, Alexander and Isabella had managed to maintain a delicate balance between public interest and private moments. They shared carefully chosen photographs and updates, allowing their subjects to feel connected to their journey while protecting their most intimate experiences. As Isabella's pregnancy progressed into the third trimester, the excitement reached fever pitch. Baby clothes arrived from well-wishers around the world. Handmade blankets poured in from elderly citizens who had spent months knitting with love and hope, and children's books in dozens of languages filled an entire room adjacent to the nursery. The palace staff had been secretly preparing for months. Mrs. Catherine Pemberton, the head housekeeper who had served the royal family for over 30 years, had personally overseen every detail. She remembered Alexander's own birth and had dreamed of the day when she would help welcome the next generation. The kitchen staff practiced preparing special meals for Isabella during her recovery, while the security team developed comprehensive plans to ensure the safety and privacy of the new family. Isabella's own preparation had been thorough and touching. She had written letters to her unborn child, sharing her hopes and dreams, describing the beautiful kingdom they would inherit, and promising to be the best mother she could possibly be. She had also worked closely with her private secretary to plan her gradual return to royal duties, ensuring that her charitable organizations would continue their important work while allowing her time to bond with her baby. The final weeks had been filled with quiet anticipation. Isabella moved carefully through the palace, one hand always protectively placed over her belly. Alexander barely left her side, canceling several official engagements to spend these precious final days together. They would often sit in the palace gardens during the late afternoon, discussing names and sharing stories about their own childhoods. The royal photographer had captured some of the most beautiful images ever taken of the couple during this time. Isabella glowed with an inner radiance that seemed to illuminate every frame, while Alexander's protective love was evident in every glance and gesture. These photographs would later become treasured memories, representing the last moments of pure joy before tragedy struck their perfect world. Then came that terrible morning when everything changed. The day that would forever divide their lives into before and after, when the fairy tale took a devastating turn that no one could have predicted or prevented. The morning of September 15th began like any other at Rosewood Palace. Isabella woke before dawn, as had become her habit in the final weeks of pregnancy. The baby had been particularly active during the night, and she found it difficult to find a comfortable sleeping position. Alexander was already awake beside her, his protective instincts having developed into an almost supernatural awareness of her every movement and need. They shared a quiet breakfast in their private dining room, overlooking the rose garden that had given the palace its name. Isabella nibbled on fresh fruit and whole grain toast, following the nutritionist's recommendations, while Alexander read through the morning briefings his private secretary had prepared. The conversation was gentle and domestic, filled with small observations about the beautiful autumn weather and plans for the day ahead. Isabella had a scheduled appointment with Dr. Hartwell that morning, a routine checkup that had become a weekly occurrence as her due date approached. These visits had become highlights of their week, opportunities to hear their baby's heartbeat and receive reassurance that everything was progressing normally. Alexander always accompanied her, his hand finding hers during every examination, their excitement growing with each passing week. The Royal Medical Suite was located in the palace's south wing, a state-of-the-art facility that rivaled the finest hospitals in the world. Dr. Hartwell had been the royal physician for nearly 20 years, having attended to both of Alexander's parents during various health concerns. His calm demeanor and exceptional skill had earned him the complete trust of the royal family. As they walked through the corridors toward their appointment, Isabella felt the familiar flutter of movement within her belly. She paused, placing both hands on her rounded stomach, and smiled as she felt what seemed like a tiny foot pressing against her ribs. Alexander stopped beside her, his face lighting up with wonder as he placed his own hand next to hers. The baby had been remarkably active throughout the pregnancy, a fact that had delighted both parents and provided constant reassurance of their child's health and vitality. Isabella often joked that they were carrying a future athlete, given the strength and frequency of the movements she felt throughout each day. Dr. Hartwell greeted them warmly in his familiar, professional manner. The examination began routinely, with Isabella settling onto the comfortable examination table while the doctor prepared his equipment. The ultrasound machine hummed to life, and the familiar sound of the baby's heartbeat filled the room. That strong, steady rhythm had become the most beautiful music in the world to both Alexander and Isabella. But something was different this morning. Dr. Hartwell's expression gradually changed from his usual confident smile to a look of concentration, then concern. He moved the ultrasound probe slowly across Isabella's belly, his eyes fixed intently on the monitor. The silence stretched longer than usual, and Isabella felt the first flutter of anxiety in her chest. Alexander noticed the change immediately. His military training had taught him to read subtle shifts in body language and atmosphere, and he could sense that something was wrong even before Dr. Hartwell spoke. The physician continued his examination, taking more time than usual, checking and rechecking his findings. When Dr. Hartwell finally set down the ultrasound probe, his face was grave. The words he spoke next would echo in their minds for the rest of their lives, simple syllables that carried the weight of unimaginable loss. The baby's heartbeat had stopped. There was no movement, no signs of life. Their child, who had been so active and strong just days before, was gone. The world seemed to stop spinning in that moment. Isabella's face went completely white, and she gripped Alexander's hand with such intensity that her knuckles turned pale. Alexander felt as though he had been struck by lightning, his entire body going numb as his mind struggled to process the devastating news. Dr. Hartwell explained the medical details with gentle professionalism, but his words seemed to come from very far away. He spoke of procedures that would need to be followed, of options for how to proceed, but Isabella heard none of it. She was lost in a fog of disbelief and crushing grief, her mind unable to accept what she had just been told. Alexander forced himself to focus, knowing that Isabella needed him to be strong and handle the practical decisions that lay ahead. He asked the necessary questions, made the required choices, and arranged for the private medical team that would assist them through the devastating process that followed. The journey back to their private quarters felt endless. Isabella moved like a sleepwalker, leaning heavily on Alexander's supporting arm. The palace corridors, which had been filled with such joy and anticipation just hours before, now seemed cold and unwelcoming. The staff they passed lowered their eyes respectfully, somehow sensing that tragedy had struck their beloved royal family. News of the loss spread quickly through the palace's inner circle, carried by whispered conversations and the heavy atmosphere that seemed to permeate every room. Mrs. Pemberton wept quietly in the kitchen, remembering Isabella's excitement just days before when they had discussed the final preparations for the nursery. The security team stood a little straighter at their posts, their protective instincts heightened by the knowledge that their princess was suffering. Alexander helped Isabella to their bedroom, where she collapsed onto their four-poster bed and curled into a tight ball of grief. The sobs that racked her body seemed to come from the depths of her soul, primal and heartbreaking. Alexander held her close, his own tears falling silently as he struggled to find words of comfort that didn't exist. The afternoon stretched into evening, marked only by the gradual fading of light through their bedroom windows. Isabella's grief was raw and overwhelming, punctuated by moments of desperate hope that this was all a terrible mistake, that their baby would somehow be all right. Alexander remained beside her throughout, his own heart breaking as he watched the woman he loved more than life itself drowning in sorrow. The palace fell into an unusual quiet that evening. Formal dinners were canceled, meetings were postponed, and the usual evening activities were suspended out of respect for the royal family's grief. The staff moved through their duties with exceptional care and discretion, understanding instinctively that their prince and princess needed space to process their devastating loss. Dr. Hartwell remained available throughout the day, checking on Isabella's physical condition while also providing gentle emotional support. He had delivered difficult news to royal families before, but the depth of Alexander and Isabella's grief touched him profoundly. Their love for their unborn child had been evident in every interaction, making this loss particularly heartbreaking to witness. As night fell over Rosewood Palace, Alexander and Isabella lay together in the darkness, holding each other close as they began the long journey through grief that would test every aspect of their love and strength. The days following the devastating diagnosis passed in a haze of medical procedures and unbearable sorrow. Isabella underwent the necessary medical intervention with quiet dignity, her body trembling with grief, while Alexander never left her side. Dr. Hartwell and his team provided exceptional care, but no amount of medical expertise could heal the wounds that had been torn in their hearts. The palace staff moved through their duties with extraordinary sensitivity during those dark days. Mrs. Pemberton personally ensured that flowers were placed in every room where Isabella might walk, hoping that small touches of beauty might provide even moments of comfort. The kitchen staff prepared Isabella's favorite foods, though she barely touched the meals that were brought to her on silver trays. Alexander found himself caught between his own crushing grief and his desperate need to protect Isabella from additional pain. He canceled all public engagements for the foreseeable future, issuing only a brief statement through the palace press office requesting privacy during their time of loss. The statement was simple and dignified, but it carried the weight of genuine anguish that touched hearts across the kingdom. The royal family's inner circle rallied around them with unprecedented support. Alexander's mother, Queen Helena, arrived at the palace within hours of receiving the news. Despite her usually formal demeanor in palace settings, she embraced Isabella with genuine maternal warmth and remained close by to provide whatever comfort she could offer. Her own memories of motherhood made Isabella's loss particularly poignant. Isabella's parents, the Duke and Duchess of Meridian, also rushed to Rosewood Palace. Her mother, Duchess Margaret, had experienced her own pregnancy loss years before Isabella's birth, and she understood the profound nature of the grief her daughter was experiencing. She sat with Isabella for hours, sharing gentle wisdom about survival and healing while acknowledging that the pain would never completely disappear. The nursery became a symbol of their loss, its carefully prepared perfection now serving as a painful reminder of dreams that would never be fulfilled. Alexander made the difficult decision to have the room sealed temporarily, unable to bear the thought of Isabella encountering the space where they had planned to welcome their child. Mrs. Pemberton carefully preserved everything exactly as it had been, understanding that someday they might want to see it again. The letters and gifts that had poured in from around the world took on a different character during this time. Citizens who had celebrated the pregnancy announcement now sent heartfelt condolences, sharing their own stories of loss and offering prayers for the royal couple's healing. The outpouring of genuine sympathy from complete strangers provided unexpected comfort during the darkest moments. Isabella struggled with feelings of failure and self-blame, despite repeated assurances from Dr. Hartwell that nothing she had done or failed to do had caused their loss. She replayed every moment of her pregnancy, searching for signs she might have missed or actions she could have taken differently. Alexander watched helplessly as the woman who had always been confident and strong questioned her every decision. Sleep became elusive for both of them. Isabella would lie awake for hours, her hands instinctively moving to her now empty belly, searching for the movement that would never come again. Alexander would hold her close, his own eyes wide open in the darkness as he struggled with his inability to fix this devastating situation or take away her pain. The palace chapel became a refuge during those difficult weeks. Father Benedict, who had officiated at their wedding, provided gentle spiritual guidance without pushing religious explanations that might have felt empty in the face of such loss. Isabella found some comfort in the quiet sanctuary, lighting candles and sitting in peaceful silence when words felt inadequate. Alexander threw himself into learning everything he could about pregnancy loss, reading medical journals, and speaking with specialists in an attempt to understand what had happened. His methodical approach to processing the tragedy was both helpful and potentially harmful, as he sometimes became lost in clinical details rather than allowing himself to simply grieve. The couple's different grieving styles occasionally created tension between them. Isabella needed to talk about their baby, to share memories of the pregnancy, and speak about the child they would never know. Alexander, trained from childhood to maintain composure in difficult situations, sometimes struggled to engage in these emotional conversations without feeling overwhelmed by his own pain. Dr. Hartwell recommended that they consider speaking with a grief counselor, someone who specialized in helping couples navigate the unique challenges of pregnancy loss. The suggestion was initially met with resistance, as both Alexander and Isabella had been raised to handle personal matters privately, but the wisdom of seeking professional support gradually became apparent. The first counseling session was awkward and difficult, held in a comfortable sitting room within the palace to ensure complete privacy. Dr. Sarah Morrison, a compassionate professional who had worked with other high-profile families, helped them understand that their grief was normal and that the different ways they processed their loss didn't indicate problems in their relationship. Slowly, very slowly, they began to find ways to honor their lost child while also beginning the long journey toward healing. Isabella started keeping a journal, writing letters to the baby they would never hold, and documenting her feelings during the most difficult days. Alexander found comfort in physical activity, spending long hours in the palace gymnasium working through his emotions with intense exercise routines. The palace staff watched with concern and hope as their prince and princess navigated these dark waters. Small signs of progress were celebrated quietly. Isabella eating a full meal, Alexander laughing at something on television, or both of them taking a walk together through the gardens. These moments were precious indicators that healing, though slow and incomplete, was beginning to take place. 3 weeks after their loss, Isabella finally felt ready to visit the sealed nursery. Alexander accompanied her, holding her hand as Mrs. Pemberton unlocked the door to reveal the perfectly prepared room. Isabella stood in the doorway for several minutes, tears streaming down her face as she took in the beautiful space that represented so much love and hope. She touched the carved crib gently, then asked Alexander to help her choose items to keep in their bedroom as reminders of the child they had loved so completely. 1 month after their devastating loss, Isabella made her first public appearance since the tragedy. The occasion was a memorial service at the Palace Chapel, held not only to honor their lost child but also to acknowledge all the families in the Kingdom of Valdoria who had experienced similar losses. The decision to hold this service had been Isabella's idea, born from her realization that their grief was shared by countless others who suffered in silence. The chapel was filled with families who had reached out to share their own stories of loss during the weeks following the royal couple's tragedy. Isabella wore a deep navy dress with pearl accents, her usual radiance subdued but her inner strength clearly evident. Alexander stood beside her throughout the service, his hand gently resting on the small of her back in a gesture of unwavering support. Father Benedict delivered a moving sermon about love that transcends physical presence and the ways that lost children continue to touch the lives of those who love them. Isabella had requested that the service focus on hope rather than despair, wanting to create something beautiful from their painful experience. The music was carefully chosen to reflect both sorrow and healing, with the palace choir performing pieces that spoke to the enduring nature of parental love. During the service, Isabella read a letter she had written to their lost child. Her voice was steady but filled with emotion as she spoke about the joy their baby had brought during those precious months of pregnancy, and the ways that brief life had already changed both her and Alexander forever. There wasn't a dry eye in the chapel as she concluded with a promise that their child would always be remembered and loved. The response to the memorial service was overwhelming. Thousands of letters poured in from families around the world who had experienced pregnancy loss, many expressing gratitude that the royal couple had chosen to acknowledge their grief publicly. Isabella read every single letter, finding comfort in the shared experiences and the knowledge that they were not alone in their sorrow. This connection with other grieving families sparked an idea that would eventually become Isabella's most meaningful charitable work. She began meeting privately with support groups for parents who had experienced pregnancy loss, listening to their stories, and learning about the resources that were most helpful during the healing process. These conversations opened her eyes to the lack of support available for families facing such losses. Alexander watched with admiration as Isabella channeled her grief into purposeful action. She worked with medical professionals and grief counselors to develop a comprehensive support program that would be funded by the Royal Foundation. The initiative would provide counseling services, support groups, and educational resources for families experiencing pregnancy loss, filling a significant gap in available services. The project became a collaborative effort between Alexander and Isabella, giving them a shared focus that helped strengthen their relationship during the healing process. Alexander's organizational skills and Isabella's emotional intelligence combined to create a program that addressed both practical needs and emotional support. Working together on something meaningful helped them rediscover their partnership beyond their shared grief. As autumn turned to winter, small signs of healing became more apparent in their daily lives. Isabella began to smile more frequently, though her laughter remained more subdued than before. Alexander found that he could think about their lost child with sadness, but also with gratitude for the love they had shared during those months of anticipation. The sharp edge of their grief gradually softened into a persistent ache that they learned to carry with greater ease. The palace slowly returned to a more normal routine, though everyone remained sensitive to the ongoing nature of the royal couple's healing process. Isabella resumed some of her charitable duties, choosing engagements that felt meaningful rather than obligatory. Her first official visit was to a children's hospital, where she spent time with young patients and their families, finding comfort in bringing joy to others. Alexander gradually returned to his official duties as well, though he remained more protective of his and Isabella's privacy than he had been before their loss. He became an advocate for men who had experienced pregnancy loss, recognizing that fathers often received less support and understanding during such difficult times. His willingness to speak openly about his own grief helped other men feel permission to acknowledge their pain. The holidays presented particular challenges as they navigated their first Christmas without the excitement of expecting their child. Isabella struggled with the family traditions and celebrations that seemed to emphasize what they had lost, but she also found unexpected comfort in creating new traditions that honored their experience. They established an annual memorial donation to the Children's Hospital where Isabella had found such purpose during her healing journey. By spring, nearly 8 months after their loss, Isabella and Alexander had developed a different but deeper understanding of their love for each other. The tragedy had tested their relationship in ways they never could have imagined, revealing both vulnerabilities and strengths they hadn't known existed. They had learned to support each other through the darkest moments while also respecting their different approaches to grief. Dr. Morrison continued to meet with them regularly, helping them navigate the ongoing challenges of healing while also addressing questions about their future. The topic of trying to have another child was complex and emotional, requiring careful consideration of both their readiness and their fears. Isabella wrestled with anxiety about future pregnancies, while Alexander struggled with his increased protectiveness and worry. The support program they had developed was officially launched on the anniversary of their loss, creating something positive and lasting from their painful experience. The ceremony was held at the palace, attended by medical professionals, grief counselors, and families who had benefited from the services. Isabella spoke about the importance of acknowledging pregnancy loss and providing comprehensive support for grieving families. The media coverage of the anniversary was respectful and focused on the positive impact of their charitable work rather than the details of their personal loss. Isabella and Alexander had learned to use their platform to benefit others while maintaining appropriate boundaries around their private grief. The balance between public service and personal healing had become one of their greatest achievements during this difficult year. As they looked toward the future, both Isabella and Alexander carried scars from their loss, but also a deeper appreciation for the preciousness of life and love. Their relationship had been forever changed by their shared grief, but it had also been strengthened by their commitment to supporting each other through the worst experience of their lives. 2 years had passed since the devastating mourning that changed everything for Prince Alexander and Princess Isabella. The acute pain of their loss had evolved into a gentler but persistent ache, woven into the fabric of their daily lives like a golden thread that caught the light at unexpected moments. They had learned to carry their grief with grace, allowing it to inform their compassion without overwhelming their capacity for joy. The support program they had created had grown beyond their wildest expectations, helping thousands of families across the kingdom and inspiring similar initiatives in neighboring countries. Isabella had become a respected advocate for pregnancy and infant loss awareness, speaking at medical conferences and working with legislators to improve healthcare policies. Her transformation from a grieving mother into a powerful force for change had been remarkable to witness. Alexander had also found new purpose through their shared mission, developing specialized training programs for medical professionals to help them better support families experiencing loss. His methodical approach and attention to detail had resulted in comprehensive educational materials that were being adopted by hospitals throughout Europe. The work had given both of them a sense that their child's brief life had created lasting positive change in the world. Their relationship had deepened in ways they never could have anticipated. The shared experience of profound loss had stripped away superficial concerns and revealed the unshakable foundation of their love. They had learned to communicate with greater honesty, to support each other's different emotional needs, and to find strength in their partnership during the most challenging times. The question of expanding their family had been a delicate topic for many months. Isabella's initial fear of another pregnancy had been completely understandable, and Alexander had been patient in allowing her to work through her anxieties at her own pace. Dr. Morrison had helped them explore their feelings about future children, addressing both their hopes and their legitimate concerns about potential loss. After extensive counseling and careful consideration, Isabella and Alexander had decided they wanted to try again. The decision wasn't made lightly or quickly, but rather emerged gradually as they both felt emotionally ready to embrace the possibility of parenthood once more. They understood that another pregnancy would bring both joy and anxiety, but they felt equipped to handle whatever challenges might arise. The news of Isabella's second pregnancy was kept private for several months, shared only with their immediate family and closest advisors. This time, they approached each milestone with cautious optimism, celebrating privately while acknowledging their fears. Dr. Hartwell provided exceptional care, and Isabella also worked with a specialist in high-risk pregnancies to ensure every possible precaution was taken. Alexander was even more protective during this pregnancy, if such a thing were possible. He had rearranged his schedule to minimize travel and ensure he was always close to Isabella. The palace staff, understanding the significance of this pregnancy, provided support that went far beyond their usual professional duties. Mrs. Pemberton, in particular, became a source of constant encouragement and practical assistance. Isabella's approach to this pregnancy was markedly different from her first experience. While she allowed herself to feel hope and excitement, she also maintained emotional protection by taking each day as it came. She continued her charitable work throughout the pregnancy, finding that staying active and engaged helped manage her anxiety while also allowing her to support other families facing similar challenges. The nursery that had been sealed after their first loss was gradually transformed into a new space. Isabella couldn't bear to use the same room, but she also couldn't leave it empty forever. Instead, they converted it into a beautiful library and quiet retreat space, placing a small memorial garden visible through the windows as a way to honor their first child while creating something positive and life-affirming. A new nursery was prepared in a different wing of the palace, decorated with soft yellows and greens rather than the traditional blue or pink. Isabella chose every detail carefully, but she also tried not to become too invested in the preparations until later in the pregnancy. Alexander supported this cautious approach, understanding that protecting Isabella's emotional well-being was the highest priority. The public announcement of the pregnancy came during Isabella's second trimester, accompanied by a thoughtful statement acknowledging their previous loss and requesting privacy during this emotional time. The response from the kingdom was overwhelmingly positive, with citizens expressing both excitement and understanding of the complex emotions the royal couple must be experiencing. As the pregnancy progressed successfully through each trimester, Isabella and Alexander allowed themselves to feel increasing hope and excitement. The baby was healthy and active, providing the reassurance they needed while also creating new fears about potential complications. They attended every medical appointment together, holding hands through each examination and celebrating each positive milestone. The final weeks of pregnancy were filled with careful preparation and managed anxiety. Isabella was monitored closely by her medical team, and contingency plans were in place for every possible scenario. Alexander took a leave of absence from all official duties to remain constantly available, and the palace was prepared to accommodate whatever medical needs might arise. When labor began, it progressed smoothly and naturally. Isabella's strength and determination were evident throughout the process, and Alexander's unwavering support provided the encouragement she needed during the most challenging moments. Dr. Hartwell and his team monitored every aspect of the delivery with exceptional care and skill. The moment their healthy baby daughter was placed in Isabella's arms was one of pure joy mixed with profound relief. Princess Victoria Helena was perfect in every way, with Alexander's blue eyes and Isabella's gentle smile already evident in her tiny features. The new parents cried tears of happiness and gratitude as they held their daughter for the first time, their hearts full of love and hope for the future. The announcement of Princess Victoria's birth was met with celebration throughout the kingdom, but Isabella and Alexander maintained their commitment to protecting their family's privacy during these precious early days. They shared carefully chosen photographs with the public while keeping most of their bonding time private and sacred. As they settled into life with their new daughter, both Isabella and Alexander felt the continuing presence of their first child in their lives. Victoria would grow up knowing about the older sibling she had never met, understanding that love transcends physical presence and that family bonds can exist beyond traditional boundaries. Their journey through loss and healing had prepared them to be more grateful, more present, and more aware of life's precious gifts. Princess Victoria would benefit from parents who understood deeply the miracle of her existence and who would never take a single moment of her life for granted. The fairy tale had been broken and rebuilt, different from its original form, but perhaps more beautiful for having survived the storm. Prince Alexander and Princess Isabella had discovered that true love doesn't prevent suffering, but it provides the strength to endure, heal, and eventually find joy again. Their story would continue, marked by both loss and love, shaped by both sorrow and hope, but ultimately defined by their unwavering commitment to each other and their growing family.